Coach, we were just talking a little bit about here at CNU. We hosted a UVA game a long time ago with back when Aleko Eskandarian was playing, a big name, and it was such a cool environment for us. And then you were reminiscing about a time we were supposed to have another game, you guys on the girls' side versus ODU, and it fell through with a huge storm that rolled through. But I loved hearing what you were talking about how afterwards you guys jumped indoors and wanted to play. And so if you don't mind, chat it up a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can't remember what year it was. I just know it was before COVID, but we had a game against one of our spring games against ODU. It was our last spring game. And so we drove down. We left here probably mid-afternoon, and it rained the whole time. It rained from the minute we left Charlottesville all the way down to CNU. We got down there, it rained, and it was thunderstorming as well. We sat there for maybe 3 or 4 hours to see if we could play this game, and we ended up couldn't play it at all. We turned around. Probably it was 9:45 at night. Got back to Charlottesville at 12:15, and at the time we had University Hall, which was our basketball arena, and we played indoor there a lot. And since it was our last spring game, we couldn't make it up. It was the last day of the spring, so we got out. The players wanted to play. We ended up playing indoor for a couple hours, and that was our last spring game that year. So it was a good group. We had a good group. They were certainly motivated, and that's one thing I remember about that spring. And it brought up when you were talking to you from CNU. It brought up that memory. So.
Yeah, I think our field can withstand a lot, but 6
I know
hours
we
pouring
were really
down.
excited to play on that field.
Yeah,
I know that.
I mean, 6 hours of pouring rain, and of course the lightning effect. That doesn't matter how much rain you get. The lightning, of course, holds everything back. But actually, I'm very good buddies with Adam Perrin, your men's assistant, and we've known each other for a long time. Scott knows him too. We worked together a bunch of camps, and he's asked me to come work a few UVA camps, and I'd only been maybe once as a kid. And it's crazy. I've been a Virginia kid, but I haven't been to UVA much. And then so I was driving up there to go work the camp. And I love seeing you. I think our facilities are awesome. But, man, there's a little bit of a whoa, when you pull up. It's just like, oh, all right, there's a different feel here. You're pulling up, you're like reminiscing on some names that are UVA names. You're like, all right, well. And you just feel it. And it's a really cool experience. I enjoy being up there. Adam, of course, is a good man. I love him. And anytime he wants me to come up and work at camp, he's going to get a yes from me. That's a cool spot.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the great things about there's a lot of great things about Virginia, but soccer wise, I think it's great to have a men and a women's team. I'm sure you know that down at CNU with Jamie and things like that, but it's great to share ideas, get creative together, talk about recruiting together. And we have a good relationship with Adam, George, and Matt over there on the men's side, and we're fortunate to have we work together really well. We're kind of in the middle of a master plan where our facilities are getting renovated. They've been renovated for the last 4 years, so I think that factor should be even more so now when you come up. There's a $70 million Olympic sports building being built now. Wow. There's a 94,000 square foot football performance building, so those things have been in the works prior to COVID. COVID put us behind a little bit. So I think at the end of all this, in a year or so, I think our facilities would match any in the country, and we're excited about that.
Yeah. Actually, I am curious. What do you think with all the chaos going on with the conferences? What are you hearing? Where are you guys going? I keep hearing your name, and UVA's going here, UVA's going there, and it's just, of course, driven, I'm sure, football and basketball wide. But, I mean, is there any insight you can give us on what you think the next 5-10 years are going to look like?
No, I think they've changed so rapidly in the last 5 years that anybody that would think they know what's happening is it's just a real I wouldn't say unstable, but it certainly has changed dramatically in the last couple of years with things happening with the transfer portal and NIL and things like that. I think a lot of these conferences are, back in the 80s, they took away the NCAA's stranglehold on the television contracts. And so it wasn't just solely NCAA, it was the conferences had the rights to these. So the conferences then took those and of course tried to make the most revenue they could out of their deals. And we're kind of now, 30 years later, we're kind of the beneficiaries of all that. Their conferences are trying to stay afloat. It doesn't, in one sense, to have two California teams and a Texas team join the ACC doesn't make sense for a lot of reasons. But I think for pure survival of a conference and not having what happened to the Pac-12 happen, you can sort of see it a little bit more. But it's just the relative confusion now that the NCAA is in and college athletics is in as a whole. So, we as a conference made a decision several years ago when conference alignment started to happen to stay together. And, I think Florida State is challenging that now. They're challenging the binding document that they put in about staying with the ACC. And if they don't, they're going to have to pay a pretty significant financial penalty. And so I don't know, we're testing all that now. And, I've heard a lot of different things as well, but I think what they undertook 5 years ago or whenever that happened about staying together as a conference, I think that's going to be hard to get out of until I think it's 2037 or something like that. So, but Florida State's challenging that. We'll see. But I think the big thing for all of us as coaches is, how important it is to keep teaching and keep developing players and keep teaching the life lessons that go on. I'm a little, I'm a little old school in that regard. That I think the reason I got into coaching was for the relationship piece and the developing players and those kinds of things. And I'm trying to stay true to that even now in a changing environment.
Yeah, I mean, how true is that? I mean, it doesn't matter who you're playing or how long of a trip it is or whatever. It's still, you've got a bunch of awesome girls and you want to develop them into great people moving forward, not just good soccer players, but you want them to be, good moms, good wives, good workers in the world, and good for society. And that'll never change. And that's the beauty of the job. And I mean, kind of jumping into recruiting now. I don't like this question at all. And Scott and I kind of laugh about it. Coach Norris and I are good buddies, and we talk about this all the time. We get the question, what do you look for in a player? And that's such a vague, broad question. And, we try to push kids into, hey, why don't you ask, what do you like in me and how do you see me fitting into the program? Like, obviously getting a little more precise, but staying on topic, staying on with those girls that are, you're trying to build these relationships with and trying to turn them into awesome human beings. What are some of the commonalities that you're having with these girls that you're seeing it 10, 15, 20 years later when they have their own kids, they have their own families, they have their own jobs and careers. And you're like, man, these are the common traits in those girls. And you could see them here, even in the recruiting process when they were 15 years old, when I first started talking to them. I mean, what are some of those traits? And maybe you got some examples of girls that are like, yeah, this is her timeline and how it went with her.
The coach and the style that you play. I think two of the most important qualities that we recruit for are not soccer related. They're more intrinsic. So how motivated are they? Do they love the game? Are they willing to suffer and go through adversity, which we have to play at this level?
Sure.
And are they competitive? Are they competitive? Those two things, certainly at our level, distinguish the women that we're recruiting. And there's different ways to evaluate that. I think these two things, in my opinion, I think we can take. I've worked with a lot lesser talented players that are really, really motivated, and they've become great players. And to me, I think the unique aspect of college, which is different than club or high school soccer, is for a lot of these players, they're traveling long distances to play, which I don't really like. I don't think that's a great thing, but in college, you're here. You've got everything you want at your footstep here. You've got the equipment, you've got the fields, you've got the coaches, you've got resources that you can use. and then so really it comes down to your desire and what comes internally for you. How good do you want to be? And that was the case for me when I was playing college. And I loved college athletics for that very reason. I didn't have to go anywhere. It was all right there in front of me. And I could do that in both senses. I could do that within the athletic realm, and I could do that in the academic realm and squeeze as much out of the university as I could. So for me, those two things are really important. I think every team's a little different in how they play and what they value. And I think for us, handling the ball under pressure, getting your head up, making good decisions, those are very important to us. So those are things when we look at players, I think those are things that we look for. I think the biggest change in the women's game that I've seen over the last 10 years is there's probably 40% less space than there was 10 years ago. And so there's not as much space. You're going to have to handle the ball well. You're going to have to make quicker decisions in tighter areas. And so what players are able to do that. So those are some things, couple intrinsic, a couple in terms of, controlling the ball, getting their head up, making good decisions that we look for. And then I think the other side of the recruiting process is, I think nowadays you have to have something special. What do you have that's special? Everybody's a little different, and do you have something that you can bring to the table that's special, that's unique? It could be one of my better players. She was just exceptionally good at heading the ball. That was a special quality of hers, and she adapted and adjusted her game in these other areas. But I think those things are important for us for our level as well.
Yeah, it's such an interesting tidbit there because, like Amherst in the Division III men's side has been a powerhouse for years. And we were watching the national title game 2 years ago. Last year, 2 years ago, I forget which one. They've been in a few recently. And they had a kid who could flip throw it 60 yards.
Yeah.
And the ball goes out of bounds on the attacking half of the field, and the game basically stops so they can set it up as if it's like a free kick. And the kid, doesn't matter, he was an outside back, I believe, and doesn't matter where on the field the throw-in is. If it's on the attacking half, he would jog over there. I can't imagine what his ticker was on how many miles of just jogging to take throw-ins, not even just the game itself. And then he would launch this throw-in, and sure enough, it's on a rope, 60 yards. And if you're a goalie, you're like, I got to deal with this 30, 40 times a game. I mean, you're begging your team to kick it out for a corner kick rather than kick it out for a throw-in. I mean, it's just dangerous.
That's so interesting. We lost the 2014 national champion. We played Florida State in the final. It was at Florida Atlantic. And it was in Florida Atlantic's football stadium, which most football stadiums are a little bit smaller. Yep. And they had the same thing. And do you know that ball was in play about 45 minutes out of a 90-minute game because they were doing just that. They had an Irish player, Megan Campbell. And I'm not taking any away from Florida State. They're a good team. But it was just a whole different dynamic to the game. Because as you say, the ball is out she's a left back. The ball's out on the right side. She's taking 30 seconds, 40 seconds to get over to throw the ball in the box. And that happened over and over again. So I can relate to that.
And God forbid you're down a goal early. That 45 seconds to walk over there turns into a minute pretty quickly. And she's going to adjust her socks a little bit.
Yes.
And, especially late in the game, she's like, well, I haven't got my yellow card yet. I'll go ahead and take a yellow and stall a little bit more. And I mean, it's true, sticking to the recruiting thing. If you have that talent, like I'm assuming maybe you got a little film of the girl that was a really good header, or, Coach Sapone up at Amherst, maybe he got video of this kid just launching a ball, but put it in your video, put it in there. Like, look, this is where I have a specialty here. I've got a wicked left foot. I could score from anywhere within 30 yards. Like, well, show me something like right away. Like, put it in your film right away. Make sure I know about it. Make sure when I finally get to put eyes on you, I want to see that special talent immediately. You can run a 4.3 40. I got to see this as soon as I can on the field. And I agree with you. If you have something special, put it out there. Let us see it right away.
Things that you have, and you have to work to overcome some of the things that may be that, and how can you best impact the game? That's the great thing about soccer. It's such a neat game that all shapes and sizes can play, and you can be effective. And so you have to learn that. You have to, and the only way you can learn that is play,
Right. Yeah, it's interesting talking about recruiting. You're recruiting some of the best kids in the country, national pool, national team kids, but you also have in the state of Virginia a love for UVA. Where I mean, I can't tell you how many girls write you saying, "My dad went to UVA, my mom went to UVA. I love the school. I've got 20 hoodies in my closet with the UVA logo on it." So that kid could be just as valuable just because of what you talked about earlier, motivated, competitive, just a love for the school. If you don't mind, talk about how you recruit a Morgan Bryan versus just a local girlfriend. I think you got a Leesburg kid, an Arlington kid that just love the school. I mean, what does that look like for you? How do you kind of decipher through that and find the kids that are going to help you win the national title?
Well, I'm not saying it's funny. I don't want anybody to feel sorry for Virginia because it's such a great school to recruit to. But the challenge really for us is, I feel like, and you probably know this as well, you need depth to win national championships. The way the soccer season's set up in college, you have to have depth. And so you can't get by with 11 players. You have to have a good nucleus of players. And the way our sport's structured with scholarships, you might have to have somebody who maybe not getting a full scholarship or on smaller amounts of money. And so that's where you have to really dig and find those players that love the game, want to get better, have potential to get better, and can contribute in ways that
You're muted.
Hey, Steve, we lost your audio.
It's really about looking at, like what I told you before, some of the things that we inherently look for in an athlete. Morgan Bryan was a unique player, a special player. Funny recruiting story with her. Morgan committed to another college. We were very we recruited her very hard, and she made a decision to go to another school in the fall of her senior year. Now, I don't know why I did this. I've never done this before nor since, but I did not fill her scholarship. So you can imagine she might have committed to the other school in October. I did not fill her scholarship. I waited, and I still to this day don't know why. But in February, she decommitted, and she opened the process up again, and she committed to Virginia after that. I don't know what if I didn't have a full scholarship for her, though. I don't know if she would have come. And so that was just a completely random thing that happened, and it happens a lot. I think timing, as you well know, Justin, probably the timing in recruiting is so. It's just that it's kind of like marriage. The timing's got to work out for you to find that person. It's the same thing in recruiting. But we're fortunate. I think there are a lot of in-state kids that want to come to Virginia. And obviously, Virginia, there's a difference between in-state tuition and out-of-state tuition. And the costs are much. Thomas Jefferson, who, built the University of Virginia, he wanted to educate all Virginians. And so it's a public school, and it costs half of what it costs for an out-of-state. That's what it costs for an in-state. So it's a good deal for in-state students, and Virginia is a good soccer state. So we're fortunate in that regard, and we've benefited from a lot of very good players that have played in-state and come to Virginia and have done a great job for us, Yeah,
there's something to be said about a kid that just loves your place, wants to be there. Maybe they need a year, and you got the benefit of a red shirt. Maybe you're like, you know what, this kid loves it. I got a superstar in her position anyways. Let's get her. Maybe it's, like you said, it's in state. So, she's going to pay much, much less, and you don't have to give her a big chunk. And then she's just going to grind for that year and just get after it and prove it. And then next thing you know, you got a kid that just loves your place, has the 20 hoodies in her closet already, and is now ready to go for your place. And that's just, we put a ton of value in that as well. When someone writes us in at the smaller D3 level, when you could tell, like, oh, wow, this kid loves our school. This kid loved it. And then when they get here, you could tell the difference. I mean, not saying the kid like, I guess I'll just go to UVA or I'll just go CNU isn't also going to give you that same effort. But there is something about the kid that just is, you could tell like, oh, I love this school. I want to be here. I've wanted to for a while. And I'm giving you everything I've got for 4 or even 5 years if I'm redshirted or whatever comes along. I mean, there's just something to be said about that.
We had a kid from Roanoke, Kate Norbo. Now, Kate was a state player. That's the highest level she went. She played a bunch of different sports. She played for the Roanoke Stars, but she wasn't a top 200 kid in the country. But Kate fit perfectly into what we were looking for from a midfielder. She was a competitor, real competitor, very motivated. And she ended up starting for us in the national championship game. And, it's a great story. Now, was she ready to compete right away? No, but she developed and she worked at her game and she fit in perfectly to our style. And it was a great success story. So those things happen a lot. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love coaching so much is, to get these players in here who maybe are under the radar. It took me a while. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, didn't develop, compete fully in soccer until I got to college. So I had a lot of time. I had to make up a lot of time. But I think my experience playing the other sports helped me a lot once I did fully focus on soccer. And I think those things that's what college is about. Can you guys give me 1 second? Just a sec. Can I hold off 1 second, Scott?
Sure.
I got a quick question for him when he gets
back. Go ahead. I was only going to go portal or NIL next.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. You get that.
No worries.
Oh, no problem.
My wife called me a couple times, and I don't know if there's an emergency or nothing. So I don't think I can get on off of this podcast, so I didn't want to take it. So
you want to call her from your landline?
Yeah.
I can just edit it.
I'm good. They're my assistant. I'll check. So I think she's all right. So yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And you weren't even. Are you the best athlete in your marriage? Wasn't Julie Shackford told me that you're.
My wife was way better. She played basketball at Michigan State, so we met. Justin, you probably could relate to this, but I knew the women's basketball coach at Michigan State, and she told me she wanted us, the soccer team, to play the women's basketball team because she thought faster, quicker athletes, would help their team. So we ended up playing them every Wednesday night in the summer for the 4 weeks of camp. And these were absolute wars. I mean, it was the most competitive game. But I covered my wife for 2 years, and we didn't say a word to each other. We just competed.
That's awesome.
Anyway, that's how I met my wife. And she's way better than I,
Yeah, we could thank Julie Shackford for that little tidbit. That's she sent that to me and said to make sure to ask about your wife.
Yeah,
her prowess. Go back to the story about the kid from Roanoke. And, what did you see in her that, obviously I'm guessing since she didn't jump right on the field for you right away, that she wasn't the best technically, but you saw something in her that was special and stood out to you, kind of an intangible things that maybe you saw that led you to recruit her.
That was one thing that I saw right from the beginning. She, when you Emily Sonnet lost 4-0 in the championship game of the national club championships, and when I was watching her, it was 3-0 in the second half with 30 minutes to go, and the player that was competing the most in that game was Emily Sonnet. That's all I need to see, So she's down 3-0. She's playing against a superior team. They're beating her, but that kid's competing and she's never quit. And that's one of the things that I saw in Kate when she played for Roanoke. But the other side was you felt you could see some of her skills. She had really good feet, and she was a really smart player. She made good decisions. And so those are things that we felt we could work with. And then when you surround her now with a Morgan Bryan, because she played in that same era, a Danielle Colaprico, who's an 8-year veteran in the pros now, her play just, it brought out, she was a competitor and she played in a very similar way to those guys, and her game elevated playing alongside of those. So, and she was willing to, she was a runner in high school as well. and she was a great engine for us. She could get end line to end line, not just box to box, but end line to end line, and she fought to win the ball back. So I mean, these are things that are intangibles that you don't know, you're not sure you see it, but when she started to play for us, this was really apparent. So it was just getting her used to how fast the game was at the college level, which she adapted to really well, and then bringing the qualities that she had and meshing those with the players that we had in the program already. And that's been something that's one of the things I'm sure, Justin, you love about soccer, but I love about soccer is bringing a bunch of skill sets together to form a great core and a great unit that have different dimensions. But, the object is to put the ball in the back of the net on one side and keep it out in the other. And if you get 11 players that are really bought into those things, they can perform really well. So,
yeah, I would doubt that there's a national championship ever in the history of national championships where there wasn't at least one story in their starting lineup where like this kid was not supposed to be with us. I mean, I would believe that if every coach that won a national title just told us how they recruited every kid, they would get to one of their starters and be like, well, interesting story. And, every year I go recruiting, I pick up a kid where I'm like, I honestly can't tell you exactly why I'm recruiting this kid, but there's just something about them. I just love it. Whatever it is, it could be on the field, it could be off, could just be like, I remember recruiting this kid from Richmond, and it wasn't even something really, I mean, I really liked him. I was watching him, but I was sitting kind of close to the bench, and he tackled somebody. It was a hard tackle, and they called, like, all the bench goes, oh, there's another Noah Smash. They called it the Noah Smash. I'm just like, yeah, I got to have this kid. He's pretty good. Don't get me wrong. I liked a lot of the qualities. He could definitely play at a CNU like 100 kids from Virginia could, but there was just something about him that tugged at my heartstrings. I just got to have this kid. And I'm sure, Coach, you've got a few of those every year, like one or two, maybe. There's more than just, oh, the kid's good enough to play for us. It's going to help us win. There's always more to the story.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the best things that you could tell potential prospects is I think it's really important that the coaches that are recruiting that prospect, there's something they like about that prospect. It might be that some coach, for whatever reason, doesn't appreciate the qualities that prospect has. I don't
Sure.
think in my experience, that's not going to change. So find the coaches that do see something in you that's quite good.
Yeah.
And those are the schools that, if you want to play, those are the schools that you should be focusing in on, even if it means you might have to adjust your thought process a little bit. For the longest time, Becky Sauerbrunn played for us. Becky, for 3 years, could not get into a national team camp. I don't think it was Becky's ability at all. It's just her qualities didn't jibe with the coach at the time. And it wasn't, you couldn't fault anybody there.
Right.
I think there are certain things that Becky needed to get better at, and she was committed to doing that. But it wasn't anything other than, you have these qualities and I value these qualities. And so once they got a coach in there that valued Becky's qualities, I think off she went, and that happens so often. But I think players sometimes don't think they're a good player or try to change who they are, when in actuality what their strengths are good. You just have to find the right fit for you. And my experience says if a coach doesn't see you as a fit, then you need to understand that and find a coach that does, or keep exploring until you find coaches that value what you bring to the table as a recruit.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I'm glad you brought up Becky. I wanted to shift a little bit, if you're ready, Scott, a little bit of the national team that you've experienced some good stories, I'm sure there. I'm actually good buddies with Allie Krieger. I grew up with her.
Okay.
Her brother, her dad was my coach. Her brother and I played club, high school, and college together. So I've known Allie since the mid '90s, and I mean, she was a superstar. And
great
fun.
Soccer family. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do you have maybe you got a fun story? I mean, I still remember watching her scoring that game-winning PK. Was it Brazil after Abby Wambach scored the header goal? I mean, what an epic game. I mean, what experience do you have? Not just with Allie, of course, but give us a little tidbits on your thoughts of being with the national team and what that was like. I mean, what a cool experience that must have been.
Yeah, it was a really good experience. I joined the national team in 2014, and I was with them, the full team. That is, I was with the full team it was in the summer of 2014 before qualifiers. The qualifiers happened in the fall of 2014, and then the World Cup in 2015 in Canada, the Olympics in 2016, and then the World Cup in 2019. So I was with them a good long time. Obviously, Allie was a big part of those teams. I think Allie is an amazing, I think, player in the sense that she did it so well for so long, and I think the game's changed a lot over time. And I think one of the things that I've witnessed in my time, that the World Cup in 2015 was unique in that we had a good mix. There was a lot of older players who had been through some World Cups, the Abby Wambachs, the Shannon Boxes, the Christy Rampones, those players like Allie, and then a lot of new faces, the Morgan Bryans, the Julie Ertz, the newer players that were coming onto the scene. I think Alex Morgan at that time was still relatively young. So that dynamic was interesting because, you kind of had to mesh two different styles. There were the players that played for Pia back in the day, and then Jill was bringing in a new kind of way that the new style of the national team. It was, again, just trying to adapt and adjust to the modern game, which was changing all the time. So, sure. And I think the same things happened through 2019, different groups. So, the national team is, I enjoyed that level so much because I think every country has a different style and it's based on their culture, and it's so different. Sometimes, I don't know if you notice this, but sometimes when you watch club soccer, it starts off, maybe the club team wants to play a certain way, but then it kind of divulges into right. Much of what you see in club soccer, which is not a lot of possession, a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of competition and athleticism, but it becomes more of a transition game. But in the international game, these teams are very committed to their style, no matter what, and I love that because it's so different from one country to another. And they have to adjust based on the talent level that they have and the pool that they have. And so you see a Japan who incredibly technical, not a lot of players that are tall players or athletic players, but very skillful, play together really well, understand their role within the system, and you're going to have to really beat them at their game, And so it's very interesting. Nigeria, different. Nigeria, a team that's very athletic, very transition oriented, not a lot of as much organization, although I feel that's changing now with their team. So it's really interesting, and it's fun. It's fun to coach in that environment because the styles are so different. So.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct. You go recruiting, you go watch clubs, and I think you're right. I think that they all start a certain way, but most of the games look similar. Yeah. It's just the way it is. And some people ask, what's it like when you get to college? And it's not anywhere near what you experience at the World Cup level, but there's a lot more like, hey, we need to prepare for what this school does. It's way different than the club game in that regard. And of course, you saw it on the highest magnitude you could at the national team level. I mean, it's such a cool thing. And I was just thinking, like, I ran into Marta actually at the airport at a convention. I mean, first of all, I didn't realize that she wasn't, like, I don't know. I think Marta, I think of like some 6'5" just monster. She's not.
No.
And what a sweetheart she was, by the way. I mean, she didn't have to talk to me at all. And what a special player. And you had to play against her. I mean, how do you deal with her? I mean, just like, good luck, put 3 girls on her. I mean, wow, she was special.
We went to Brazil. We went to Brazil in 2015 2014 in December. And we had just lost the national championship game. And I flew from Florida to Brazil, met up with the national team, and we played a tournament there. And we absolutely got smoked by Brazil. It was kind of the end of the year for our players. And so, but I think the combination of sort of a long season, plus we were in Brazil playing the U.S. in their home stadium. And I'm telling you, the stadium was rocking and we just got smoked. And Marta ran riot. She was kind of in her prime then. And, but she's such a unique talent. But I think it showcases her, and the Brazil team showcases kind of the evolution of women's soccer in our country. You know, you just can't. I remember in 2014, I'll give you this example. In 2014, we played 5 games in the qualifiers. We played Guatemala, El Salvador, Trinidad and Tobago, Costa Rica, and Mexico. And we won all 5 games. But I remember I brought some of our match analysis to the national team at the time, and one of the things I was tracking was unforced turnovers. So, and what I thought was interesting about unforced turnovers, it didn't have anything to do with the other team. So, for instance, if a player passed the ball out of bounds from 12 yards out, there was no pressure on her, that would have been an errant pass. That would have been kind of an unforced turnover. If they tried to play a ball in behind a back line and it was not received, or it didn't end up penetrating, that wouldn't be an unforced turnover, because that's what you're trying to encourage. That it's part of penetrative play. You want them to look for opportunities to play the ball in behind. If I played a ball to you, Justin, and it bounced off your kneecap and there's nobody around you, that could be a poor first touch. That's an unforced turnover. And so we were tracking these in the qualifiers, and you'd be surprised. My college team averaged less than 14 unforced turnovers a game. It doesn't matter, you know, if you're playing against Roger Federer in tennis and he hits you a ball right in your sweet spot in your forehand, and you hit that back in the net, that's nothing Roger Federer. That's an unforced turnover. That's you. Right. It's on you. And so we track those. In those qualifiers, we were averaging over 40 unforced turnovers a game.
Whoa.
Now you think about that. There's no way in the modern game there's no way you could do that. The reason we were successful is because we could win the ball back very easily. We had superior athletes. And it was, even if we lost the ball, we could win it back. But there's no way we could have been able to do that in the World Cup. So over the next year, we were tracking this, and we kept giving the feedback. This was something we emphasized over and over again, how important it was to value the ball. And in the World Cup, in the games in the World Cup, we averaged almost 16. So that's a huge difference. And I think one of the reasons that we were successful in that World Cup is if we would average 40 against teams like Germany and Japan, there's no way in the modern game with those teams, the quality of players that have, we would have won the ball back as easily, and it would have much more physical game. So I think those are just some of the ways that the game's changing and how we have to change, and we have, but I still think we have to continue to change in order to maintain our place as a top country in the world in women's soccer.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the difference in the players and, philosophy in bringing players into the group. I know that you were with some of the younger national team groups as well. So talk about, are you developing players there? I mean, you're not looking for finished products at U17, right? So what's kind of the blend of polishing a team versus developing players to be, long-term members of the people?
Well, at that time, I feel at that time there was, and rightfully so, we're such a big country that, and, when I first started out with the youth national teams, we might have had 3 camps per year. So you want to try to bring in the players you feel have the most potential. Maybe they're not the best players at that particular point in time, but they have the potential to be the best players at the, down the road. And so there's a big difference between looking at those players who are the best players at their age group and the players that have the best potential to be the best players down the road. And because those are the players you want to invest in. Our country, the more camps we can have, the more you can evaluate and the better you can assess those players. So it was nice to see at the youth national team level a lot more structure from the early 90s through to the 2000s. There were more camps. There was more resources put in the youth national teams. And I think I think that helped not only develop players, but also evaluate players that could be the next Mallory Swanson, the next Sophia Smith, the next Lindsey Horan, those kinds of things. And I think you need those camps where you can bring them in, assess them, but also then bring them back and again so they can keep getting experience at the national team level. It's different, I mean, I look at the under 20 national team that won in the 2012. That was the last youth national team that won a world championship, was in 2012. You think about that now. So we took that team to Japan. Crystal Dunn was on that team. Julie Ertz was on that team. Sam Ewis was on that team. Morgan Bryan was on that team. That was a good contingent of players there that competed on that team and did well. And I think if you ask those players, they would tell you that experience really helped them. It's totally different club situation, totally different a college situation than an international situation. It's just a different game. I mean, and it's a different tournament. You're not used to that. And so I think that those kind of experience are invaluable for players. And how can we get those players into that now? We're not making the finals of world championships, so they're not getting that experience as much anymore. And that's something we have to look at, and how can we get better at that? Because I think that's really helped us, really helped us. So I think it's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for us now, since there's a lot more emphasis now in the world game internationally. There more and more federations are putting way more resources into the women's game than they ever have, and you can see what's happening as a result of that. And so we're gonna have to keep on top of that, and that's gonna make a difference for us.
I wanted to shift gears one more time. I know we're getting close to the end of the hour here, but talk about the transfer portal, NIL, how that's impacting, a big program like UVA. How much are you using the portal? Is NIL kind of trickling down to the Olympic sports at your level, and that sort of thing? Just kind of give a broad, summary of how you see that impacting now and then on down the road.
Well, I would say, not too long ago, I think we were recruiting high school, just high school club players. That was the bulk of our pool, was high school club players. And I think it's a little different in the men's game, because I think the international game for the men's game has grown at an earlier time than the women's game. The women's game now is catching up, and I think there are more players at the international level that can compete at the highest level of Division I now in our country. So that's another pool of players that you can look for now. The transfers now are another one. You can't not look at transfers now if you want to compete, because there are so many good players now that are coming and that are looking to get into the transfer portal. So that's another element. Even your players, that your players have playing during COVID. I'm looking at recruiting players that have played for me that have an extra year of COVID eligibility. That's another pool of players that we can draw from to recruit that wasn't on the table. Now we can only do that one more year because those are the players that got affected by COVID. Is only one more year coming. But there's what I'm saying is there's way more a pool of players that you can look for than just club players in this day and age. And so it's changed things a lot. And I think it's going to change things dramatically as we go forward now. I think there are players decommitting because of NIL deals now in our sport. Mostly you saw that a year ago in football and basketball, but I think that's happening now in soccer and probably other sports as well. So these are real recruiting issues that we have to take up and understand. And I think the big and the other side is our programs developing. So now there are more players in the women's side that are turning pro and foregoing college. And so, as a coach, you have to do your homework on the front end to figure out, okay, who's a really good match for your university, who values education, who can obviously compete and make an impact in your program. And, you could see that internationally. You could see that a transfer portal wise, you can see that club wise, or you could see that even with players coming back and having an extra year that are on your team already. So it's made for it's a difficult challenge because you have to do that, but you have to be that much better of a financial planner as a coach, a college coach, because you have to make your money. You have to look at your money and see where it's going, and you might have to save some money potentially because there might be somebody in the transfer portal that you feel could impact your program, and you want to be ready for that when the time comes. So there's a lot more, and again, you're going to have all these cards available to you, and it's about playing them at the right time. I keep going back to that timing thing. That's such an interesting dynamic to it. In 1 month you might have money, and then just in 30 days time you might not. And so it could be the difference between you getting a player or not getting a player. That's what I'm talking about with timing. Or you might not know about a player that could fill a position and that one's not available at this point in time. So there's a lot of different elements to it, and it makes it that much more. I think it's changing. It's constantly in flux, I guess I would say, and you have to be constantly on top of it, looking at your big board and sort of making sure that you're ready for some things that inevitably happen one way or the other.
Yeah. That's it's an ever-changing landscape. So it's just something that, obviously you guys are all paying attention to.
I can give you an example. We recruited a player from Norway several years ago. She was a great player, and we were excited about her. She committed, and then COVID hit. And so we, as a ACC school, we were one of the few schools that started up again during that COVID fall. And I told her, I said, listen, we are not sure whether this is going to happen or not in the fall. You're playing full time in your country. Stay there, play there. We'll have you come in January. I thought that would be a good thing, keep her playing, because we didn't know how many games we were going to play. Well, in November of that year, she got an offer from PSG and she turned pro. So we lost her, So we started to recruit another player from overseas, committed her in December, and she ended up decommitting in the spring. So there we were stuck without a forward. And I remember we had played in the semifinal of the national championship. Our NCAA tournament went to the spring that year. They didn't do it in the fall. So we lost in the semifinals of the national championship. I came home the next day. I looked in the transfer. I don't know why I did it. I just randomly looked in the transfer portal, and there was a kid who we were really excited about. And 2 days later, she committed to Virginia, and she was a starter for us, first round draft pick in the NWSL 2 years later. But again, really weird ebb and flow of the recruiting process. But we ended up with a kid that really helped us in the long run, and we got her in the transfer portal.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know we're just at an hour. So, Steve, I can't thank you enough. This has been fantastic. Thank you for coming on and being generous with your time.
Anytime. Let me know if you want to do this again. So I always enjoy chatting soccer. So it's fun. As Justin knows, we do a lot of things that are not soccer related, when you're a college coach. So it's always good to get together with good soccer people and talk soccer. So I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Steve.
Definitely have you on again for sure. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Good to talk to you. Justin, good to meet you. I'll see you soon, I hope.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I'll see you on the field soon.
Yep.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Bye.